Part 1. The Galactic Council's Bureau of Ceremonial Affairs was old. Very, very old. It had existed for 12,000 years, which was longer than most species had been walking upright. The Bureau had one job: to make sure that every celebration, every ceremony, and every festival across the galaxy followed proper rules. There were forms to fill out. There were permits to obtain. There were inspectors who would visit your planet and measure the exact brightness of your decorative lights. Administrator had worked at the Bureau for 400 years. She was a species that looked somewhat like a very tall praying mantis made of blue crystal. Her people lived for a long time and they valued order above all things. This made her perfect for her job. She had never once questioned the Bureau's protocols. She had never wondered if maybe, just maybe, celebrations were supposed to be fun. The Bureau regulated parties for 847 different species. They held grief rituals where everyone glowed in the dark and hummed sad songs for 3 days straight. The Hive Collective did telepathic commemorations where millions of minds thought happy thoughts at the same time. They had plant growth ceremonies where they stood very still in special light for hours. Everything was orderly. Everything was approved. Everything had the proper documentation. And everything, if was being completely honest with herself, was profoundly boring. Then humanity joined the Galactic Council. Humans were new. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel about 50 years ago, which was nothing in galactic terms. They were small, soft, and squishy. They only lived for about 80 years, which seemed almost cruel. They came from a wet little planet with one moon, and they had spent most of their history fighting each other over patches of dirt. No one expected much from them. The first incident report arrived on S's desk exactly 3 cycles after Earth's official admission to the Council. She remembered the moment clearly. She had been organizing her filing system, which she did every morning because it brought her peace. Then her assistant, a nervous young named, came rushing into her office with a data tablet clutched in his 4 hands. "Administrator," he said, his feathers standing straight up in alarm. "We have a situation on Station 9. Took the tablet and read the report. Her crystal eyes grew wider with each line. A human birthday party had taken place in Residential Sector 7. The celebration had apparently marked the anniversary of a specific human's emergence from their mother, which was not unusual. Many species celebrated such things. What was unusual was everything else. The noise complaints numbered 17. Several species had reported sounds that they described as aggressive rhythmic thumping coming from the human quarters. Chemical alerts had been triggered twice by something called silly string, which was apparently a pressurized canister that shot out colorful sticky threads. A diplomat had accidentally consumed something called beer, which was fermented grain liquid, and had then tried to photosynthesize under a flashing light that changed colors very rapidly. He had to be carried to medical. But the strangest part of the report was the interviews with witnesses. A trader who lived next door to the party had been asked if she wanted to file a formal complaint. She had said no. When asked why not, she had said, "I do not know. I am not upset. I am feeling something strange. I think I am happy." Read this line several times. Then she called an emergency meeting. The observation team she dispatched to study human celebrations consisted of 5 Bureau agents. They were professionals. They had studied the ceremonial practices of dozens of species. They had advanced degrees in comparative festivity and cultural commemoration. They were serious beings who took their work seriously. They returned after 2 weeks on Earth and barely recognized them. Agent Astern, who had never smiled in his 300 years of life, walked into the debriefing room wearing a shirt that said, "I went to Vegas and all I got was THIS lousy t-shirt." He did not explain what this meant. When asked, he simply chuckled and said, "You had to be there." Agent, who belonged to a species that communicated through subtle color changes in their skin, had somehow learned a human dance called the Macarena. She demonstrated it during the debriefing. It involved moving your arms in a specific pattern and then jumping and rotating your body. It looked completely ridiculous. 3 other agents joined in halfway through. Agent had developed what she called an addiction to a human food item. It was a flat circle of bread covered in tomato sauce and melted cheese with various toppings. Humans called it pizza. Had brought 17 pizzas back to the station with her. She ate 2 during the debriefing and offered slices to everyone present. Agent Mox had learned 47 human party games. He kept trying to explain something called beer pong, but would start laughing so hard that he could not finish. And then there was the team leader. He was a species known throughout the galaxy for their absolute seriousness. Did not joke, did not play, had once signed a treaty that outlawed frivolity on their home world, had been chosen to lead the team specifically because nothing could affect his professional demeanor. Walked into the debriefing room wearing a small pointed hat covered in glitter. The hat had words printed on it in a human language. The words said, "Party Animal." He sat down at the table, folded his hands in front of him, and looked at with completely serious eyes. "Administrator," he said, "we have a problem." "I can see that," replied, staring at the hat. "No," said, "you do not understand. The problem is not that humans have unusual celebrations. The problem is that their celebrations are better than ours, better than everyone's." He pulled out a data tablet and placed it on the table. Charts and graphs filled the screen, happiness metrics, social bonding measurements, psychological well-being indicators. Every species that attends a human party reports elevated positive emotions for weeks afterward, explained. Productivity increases, conflict decreases, depression rates drop. These are not small numbers, administrator. These are significant statistical changes. Studied the data. The numbers were indeed impressive, but they did not explain the hat. "Agent," she said carefully, "why are you wearing that on your head?" Reached up and touched the glittery hat. For a moment, something flickered across his face. It might have been embarrassment, it might have been joy. It was hard to tell. "A human child gave it to me," he said, "at a celebration called a birthday party. She was turning 6 years old. She said I looked like I needed to have more fun." He paused. She was correct. The room was silent for a long moment. "The Bureau has existed for 12,000 years, finally said. "We have regulated celebrations for 847 species. We have protocols. We have standards. We have proper procedures." "Yes," agreed. "And none of it works as well as giving someone a silly hat and telling them to dance." Looked around the room. Agent was eating a slice of pizza. Agent's skin was cycling through bright, happy colors. Agent Mox was quietly humming a tune that he had learned at something called a karaoke bar. These were her best agents. These were trained professionals with centuries of experience, and they had been completely transformed by 2 weeks of exposure to human parties. "We need more information," decided. "We need a full study, a proper investigation into human celebratory practices." "I volunteer," said every agent at the same time. Assigned senior cultural analyst to lead the investigation. Was thorough, was professional, had never once let emotions interfere with her research. Was confident that would provide an objective assessment. This was, she would later realize, a mistake, not because was unprofessional, but because no one could study human parties and remain unchanged. No one. Part 2. Senior cultural analyst belonged to a species called the. They were small beings, about the size of a human child, covered in soft gray fur with large eyes that could see in almost complete darkness. They were known for 2 things, their excellent hearing and their complete dedication to scientific objectivity. Had published 300 papers on comparative cultural practices. She had spent decades studying the ceremonial behaviors of dozens of species. She had never once allowed personal feeling to influence her research. She was, in other words, exactly the wrong person to send into the field. His assignment was simple: spend 6 standard months embedded with human populations, visit their colonies, observe their celebrations, document everything, report back with recommendations. Her first report arrived after 3 weeks on a human colony called New Brisbane. It was professionally written, carefully organized, and contained the first hints of what was to come. Humans do not merely commemorate events, wrote. They throw parties. I have spent considerable time analyzing this phrase. To throw something implies force, energy, and a certain lack of control over where the object will land. This is an accurate description of human celebrations. They throw parties the way other species might throw grenades. The results are similarly explosive, though considerably more colorful. Read this report and felt the first stirring of concern. The second report arrived after 5 weeks, had attended something called a housewarming party, which was a celebration held when humans moved into a new dwelling. She had expected a simple ceremony. Perhaps some words would be spoken. Perhaps a symbolic object would be placed in the home. That was how most species handled such things. Instead, she found chaos. The humans arrived carrying wrapped packages, wrote. These packages contained gifts for the new home's occupants. The gifts ranged from practical items like cooking implements to purely decorative objects to something called a gag gift, which is apparently a gift chosen specifically because it is useless or absurd. One human gave another human a singing fish mounted on a plaque. The fish was not real. It was mechanical. When activated, it moved its mouth and sang a song about not worrying and being happy. Everyone laughed. I do not understand why, but I also laughed. This concerns me. Notice that the report's formatting was slightly less precise than usual. She made a note in his file. The third report arrived after 8 weeks, had attended a human wedding reception. This was a celebration held after 2 humans officially bonded themselves to each other in a mating partnership. Had studied bonding ceremonies across 40 different species. She thought she knew what to expect. She did not know what to expect. The ritual includes elements that I can only describe as organized madness, wrote. The bonded pair enters the celebration hall while music plays very loudly. Everyone stands and applauds. Then there are speeches, during which various humans tell stories about the bonded pair. Some stories are sweet. Some are embarrassing. One human told a story about the groom falling into a swimming pool while trying to impress the bride on their first meeting. Everyone laughed, including the groom. Then comes the dancing. All humans dance at wedding receptions. This is not optional. Even humans who claim they cannot dance are forced onto the dance floor by other humans. There is a specific dance called the chicken dance that involves flapping your arms like a bird. Adult humans, some of them very old and distinguished, performed this dance with complete sincerity. But the most confusing element is the ritual of throwing plant reproductive organs. The bride holds a bundle of flowers and throws it backward over her shoulder into a crowd of unmarried female humans. They compete to catch it. Catching the flowers supposedly means you will be the next to bond. I watched a human grandmother tackle a young woman to catch these flowers. She was 73 years old. She was not injured. She seemed proud. My emotional readings were off my scanner's charts. I have never recorded happiness levels this high in any species. The humans were not just celebrating a bonding. They were celebrating being alive. They were celebrating being together. They were celebrating the simple joy of existence. I need new equipment. My current scanners cannot measure what I am seeing. Read this report 3 times. Then she contacted directly via communication link. Analyst, she said, are you maintaining proper scientific distance from your subjects? There was a pause. Then's face appeared on the screen. She was wearing something on her head. It was a band with 2 small springs attached, and on top of each spring was a glittery heart that bobbed when she moved. Absolutely, Administrator said. Complete objectivity at all times. What is that on your head? Reached up and touched the bouncing hearts. A human gave it to me. At the wedding, she said I looked cute. I am not certain what cute means, but I believe it is a compliment. She paused. I have decided to keep it for research purposes. Ended the call feeling deeply uneasy. The reports continued to arrive. Each one was stranger than the last. Attended something called a Super Bowl party, which was a celebration centered around watching humans chase an oblong ball across a grass field. The actual ball chasing was secondary to the food, which included items like buffalo wings, not made from real buffaloes or real wings. Nachos, a complex construction of fried corn, melted cheese, and various toppings, and seven-layer dip, which described as a religious experience in food form. She attended a Halloween party, where humans deliberately dressed as frightening things and then gave candy to children. She attended a baby shower, which was not a method of cleaning infants, but rather a celebration of an impending birth that involved playing games and giving gifts. One game involved guessing the size of the pregnant human's belly using string. Found this deeply strange and also deeply charming. Then came the report from week 14. I have discovered something called New Year's Eve, wrote. This is a celebration of the planet Earth completing one full orbit around its sun. From a scientific perspective, this is not remarkable. All planets orbit their stars, but humans treat this ordinary astronomical event as an excuse for the largest party of their year. The celebration begins in the evening and continues until after midnight when the new year officially starts. As midnight approaches, humans gather in large groups. They count backwards from 10. This countdown serves no practical purpose. The year will change whether they count or not, but they count anyway together, their voices joining into one. When they reach 0, they emit high-pitched vocalizations. These are called cheers. They are very loud. Then they apply their mouthparts to nearby companions. This is called kissing. It is a human expression of affection and happiness. I was invited to a New Year's Eve party. I did not intend to participate fully. I am a scientist. I am an observer. But when the countdown reached 0, the human next to me took my hand and squeezed it gently. She said, "Happy New Year, little friend." And then she hugged me. I do not understand what I felt in that moment. My people do not have a word for it. It was warm and bright and overwhelming. It was like being wrapped in light. I participated in the cheering. I participated in the celebration. I may have danced. I am not the same researcher I was when I started this study. I do not know if this compromises my data. I do not know if I care. Put down the report and stared at her wall. Outside her window, the Bureau's headquarters hummed with quiet efficiency. Forms were being filed. Permits were being processed. Celebrations across the galaxy were being regulated according to proper procedure. It all suddenly seemed very empty. The final report arrived after 22 weeks. Had discovered karaoke. Karaoke, she wrote, is a human activity where individuals sing songs in front of other people, usually badly. The songs are displayed on a screen with the words highlighted so the singer can follow along. The quality of the singing does not matter. What matters is the courage to try. What matters is the willingness to be vulnerable, to be silly, to be imperfect in front of others. I sang a human song called Don't Stop in front of 47 strangers. I did not know the song well. I missed several notes. My voice cracked during the high parts. When I finished, every human in the room stood up and applauded. They cheered for me, not because I was good, but because I had tried, because I had participated, because I had allowed myself to be part of their joy. Request immediate extraction. Also request karaoke machine for personal quarters. Final assessment was damning, not of humans, of the Bureau. Human celebrations succeed because they prioritize joy over procedure, she wrote. They are messy, loud, inefficient, and absolutely magnetic. They do not make sense. They do not follow rules. They do not require permits or forms or approval. They require only one thing: a willingness to be happy together. Species who attend human parties report elevated happiness metrics for weeks afterward. Productivity among human-adjacent populations has increased by 340%. Depression rates have dropped. Conflict has decreased. The data is irrefutable. Humans are simply better at having fun. Recommendation: we need to learn from them, or we need to admit that we have been doing this wrong for 12,000 years. Read the report. She read it again. She read it a third time. Then she convened an emergency session of the Galactic Council's Bureau of Ceremonial Affairs. Part 3. The emergency session of the Bureau of Ceremonial Affairs was the largest gathering in its 12,000-year history. Representatives from 847 species filled the Great Assembly Hall, a massive chamber designed to accommodate beings of every size, shape, and atmospheric requirement. Crystalline sat beside gelatinous blobs. Telepathic hive representatives shared space with species that communicated through dance. The hall hummed with 1,000 different languages, all translated by the Universal Communication System into something everyone could understand. Administrator stood at the central podium, her blue crystal form catching the light from 100 different suns streaming through the windows. Behind her, a massive screen displayed data, charts, graphs, happiness metrics that went off the scale. For 12,000 years, this bureau has regulated celebrations across the galaxy. We have created protocols. We have established standards. We have ensured that every festival, every ceremony, every party follows proper procedure. She paused. In the front row, she could see sitting with the observation team. Agent was still wearing his party animal hat. Agent was quietly eating pizza. Agent's skin kept cycling through happy colors that were definitely not appropriate for a formal assembly. And in 12,000 years, continued, we have never once asked ourselves a simple question: are our celebrations actually making anyone happy? A murmur rippled through the assembly. This was not the kind of thing administrators usually said at official meetings. The data is clear, said, gesturing to the screen behind her. Human celebrations are more effective than anything we have ever regulated. They produce higher happiness levels. They create stronger social bonds. They result in better outcomes across every measurable metric. A delegate raised a branch-like appendage. But their celebrations are so disorganized, he said, his leaves rustling with disapproval. There are no forms, no permits, no proper procedures. Correct, agreed. There are no forms, and their celebrations are still better than ours. Another delegate spoke up, an elder whose crystalline face bore the signs of great age. You cannot be suggesting that we abandon 12,000 years of tradition. I am suggesting, said carefully, that we learn from a species that has only been part of our council for 50 years. I am suggesting that they know something we do not. I am suggesting that perhaps, just perhaps, we have been doing this wrong. The assembly erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. Several species changed colors in alarm. A group of beings that communicated through silence sat very still in a way that somehow conveyed extreme displeasure. Let the noise continue for a moment. Then she raised her hand. I move, she said, that we put this to a vote. The resolution is simple. The Bureau of Ceremonial Affairs will adopt human party standards as the new galactic baseline for celebrations. The vote took 3 hours. There were speeches for and against. There were debates about tradition and change. There were concerns about noise levels and silly string regulations. 33 species ultimately voted against the resolution, including several that communicated through silences and found the concept of loud music philosophically offensive. But 814 species voted in favor. The resolution passed. The Bureau of Ceremonial Affairs was restructured over the following months. Human party planners were embedded in every sector of the galaxy. These were humans who had professional experience in creating celebrations. They came with strange equipment: speakers, disco balls, chocolate fountains, karaoke machines, and something called a photo booth that let people take pictures of themselves wearing absurd props. New guidelines replaced the old protocols. The document was shorter than any bureau regulation in history. It fit on a single page. Celebrations must include at minimum one activity that risks mild embarrassment, it read. There must be at least 3 food items that serve no nutritional purpose whatsoever. Music must be loud enough to feel in your thorax. Dancing is encouraged but not required. Silly hats are always appropriate. The first Galactic Standard Party was held 6 months later, commemorating the anniversary of the Accords. This was a peace treaty that had ended a war between 3 major powers. In the past, it had been commemorated with a solemn ceremony involving speeches, formal attire, and respectful silence. This year was different. The party was held in the Grand Commemoration Hall, but the hall had been transformed. A massive dance floor dominated the center. Lights in every color flashed and spun across the ceiling. A DJ stood at a raised platform, mixing music from 100 different worlds. The chocolate fountain, modified to accommodate 17 different biochemistries, bubbled happily in one corner. The photo booth had props ranging from oversized glasses to foam swords to tentacle attachments for species that wanted to pretend they had more limbs. Arrived in her formal robes, as tradition demanded, she stood at the entrance for a long moment, watching the chaos unfold before her. A diplomat was attempting to eat something called cotton candy and seemed deeply confused by the way it dissolved on his leaves. A group of were learning a human dance that involved a lot of spinning. 2 elders, including the one who had spoken against the resolution, were posing in the photo booth wearing feathered boas. And everyone was smiling. Had never seen so many different species smile at the same time. She had not even known that some of these species could smile. But here they were, their faces arranged in expressions of joy, their bodies moving in ways that served no practical purpose except to express happiness. She stepped onto the dance floor. The DJ, a young human woman with bright purple hair, noticed her approaching. She grinned and gave a thumbs up. "Administrator," she shouted over the music, "glad you could make it, you ready to party?" Had no idea how to answer this question. She had spent 400 years managing ceremonial affairs. She had never once partied in her life. She did not know what it involved or whether she was capable of it. "I will try," she said. That was apparently the right answer. The DJ's grin widened. "That's all you gotta do," she said. "That's the whole secret." The night went on. Found herself doing things she had never imagined. She ate pizza, which was delicious. She attempted the Macarena, which she did badly, but no one seemed to care. She posed in the photo booth wearing a crown made of flowers. She danced to songs she did not know, moving her body in ways that felt strange and wonderful. At some point, she had lost track of time, which never happened to her. She found herself near the beverage station, catching her breath. A human woman approached her, recognized her as Ambassador, Earth's official representative to the Galactic Council. "Having fun?" asked. Considered the question. Fun. Such a simple word, 4 letters in the human language. It did not seem adequate to describe what she was experiencing. "I believe so," she said. "This is very different from our traditional commemorations." Laughed. It was a warm sound full of genuine amusement. "I heard about those. Lots of standing still and being respectful." "Yes, very dignified, very proper." "Sounds boring." Should have been offended. The traditional commemorations had been developed over thousands of years. They represented the accumulated wisdom of countless species. They were dignified, proper, and extremely well documented. They were also, she now realized, extremely boring. Yes, she admitted, they were. Handed her something. It was a small tube, brightly colored with a feathered end. Party favor, explained. You blow into it. Examine the object. It looked ridiculous. It served no practical purpose. It was exactly the kind of thing the Bureau would never have approved under the old regulations. I have to ask, she said, how did your species develop these techniques? What ancient wisdom drives your celebration protocols? Laughed again. Honestly, we just figured out a long time ago that life is hard enough. When you get a reason to be happy, you should be really happy about it, she shrugged. Also, we get bored easily. We only live about 80 years. We don't have time for boring parties. Turned the party favor over in her hands. 80 years. That was nothing. I could spend 80 years filling out a single form. Humans lived their entire lives in less time than had spent organizing her filing system. And yet they had figured out something that her species, with all their centuries, had never understood. Joy was not something to be regulated. It was not something to be managed. It was something to be experienced fully and completely in whatever time you had. She put the party favor to her speaking orifice and blew. The sound it made was ridiculous, a high-pitched honk that echoed across the dance floor. The feathered end unrolled and shot out, then snapped back. Several nearby delegates turned to look at her. Administrator of the Bureau of Ceremonial Affairs, dignified representative of the people, felt something strange happening to her face. Her mouth was curving upward. Her eyes were crinkling at the corners. She was making a sound, a sort of rhythmic exhalation that she barely recognized. She was laughing. The DJ noticed and threw her a thumbs up. Agent walked past, his party animal hat bobbing, and patted her on the shoulder. Appeared from somewhere in the crowd, her bouncy heart headband jiggling and pulled back onto the dance floor. "Come on, administrator," shouted over the music. "You haven't lived until you've done karaoke." Let herself be pulled along. Behind her, the galaxy's representatives danced and laughed and ate foods that served no nutritional purpose. They wore silly hats. They took ridiculous pictures. They made sounds that their ancestors would have found deeply undignified. And they were happy, truly, genuinely, completely happy. 12,000 years of tradition, thought, exposed as inadequate by a species that had only discovered fire a geological ago. But she was not upset about this. She was not offended. She was grateful. Because now she knew the secret. The humans had shared it freely, without asking for anything in return. They had taught the galaxy something that should have been obvious all along. Life was short. Even for species that lived for centuries, life was short compared to the vast emptiness of space and time. And when you found something worth celebrating, a birthday, a wedding, a peace treaty, or just the simple fact of being alive, you should celebrate it properly. Loudly, messily, with music that you could feel in your thorax and food that served no purpose except to taste good, with dancing that looked silly and laughter that came from somewhere deep inside. The galaxy, decided, had been taking itself far too seriously. But that was changing now, one party at a time. She stepped up to the karaoke machine, selected a human song she had never heard before, and began to sing. She was terrible at it. Everyone cheered anyway.